We kind of don't see it like that. We see that we're a small partner in the big picture and working with a great bunch of people over here, doing the job that we've been asked to do by the Australian government. We're just out to do that well, and hopefully the results of that will show in the future.
Can you tell me, what does it feel like? This is what a lot of people will be interested to know, to be part of a combat mission, or a combat fighter mission.
Once you enter Iraq, it's complete concentration at the task at hand. It takes a lot of focus to be able to talk to the people you need to talk to and find the targets you need to find. So there's not much emotion running, it's just basically mission focused to get the job done.
So, have you been shot at, and if so, what does it feel like?
I personally haven't been shot at, or not that I've known about. It's very difficult to see anti-aircraft artillery fired from the ground in daylight, which is where most of our operations have been conducted. However, to minimise the chances of being hit or being fired upon, the tactics we've developed and that we're using over here, much the same as the other coalition countries, are designed such that threat is minimised.
Is there anything you'd like to say to the people at home?
Yeah, I'd like to say happy birthday to my fiancée, a big hello to all my family and friends, and thanks very much to all the Australians that have lent their support by sending us a message to the troop faxes. We've got a lot of them, and they're great to read. Thanks very much.
Sir, if you could tell me about the flight tonight, I mean, why the Aussies? Why are we a part of flying? I mean, what makes us different?
I suppose we are part of the coalition and we're doing similar missions to what our other coalition partners are doing. But our flexibility and professionalism, our training allows us to fine-tune the mission and carry much needed cargo, food, water to the frontline troops inside Iraq.
How experienced are the Aussies at doing this? I mean, some say you can never prepare for something like this. I mean, what sort of things have you done to ensure that the crew flying these missions are fully prepared to the best they can be?
Yeah, these are challenging missions, but the crews are well trained, they're very experienced, and we've been doing this profile, this type of mission for many years. So we're very much in the groove for this type of mission.
Tell me what sort of threats the crew potentially could face.
The biggest threat for the crew is actually the conditions, the weather conditions and the darkness that's out there, because there's so few lit areas. It is quite dark out there, and it's quite a challenge for the crews involved.
How difficult is the task of actually flying something like a bulldozer, for instance, into an area that does have such that threat?
Yeah, there are challenging aspects to it. I mean, all the aspects are challenging, but the crews go through each aspect of the mission. They study the route, study the threats, have a look at the weather conditions, and make sure that they are well prepared to conduct the mission.
And just finally, I guess, well, we can't talk about that. That's what happens if the bird goes down. Tell me about the C-130H model. I mean, as far as you can identify, I mean,
Sure.
What sort of things does it have that equip it to fly these sorts of missions?
Well, it's an outstanding warhorse. It's been with us for a long time, over 20 years. We've had a lot of time to fine-tune its equipment and the way we conduct our business to make sure that we maximise its potential. We operate with night vision equipment to ensure that we can fly low and blacked out to maximise our chances of getting in and out undetected. It's a great piece of kit.
Okay, just giving that a little bit shorter, so just
Okay.
It's a great warhorse.
Okay.
Something just short and
Sure.
sharp, yeah. Tell me about the C-130H model. I mean, why it?
Okay, the H model is an outstanding warhorse. It's been with us for over 20 years, and because we've had it for such a long time, we've been able to fine-tune the way we do business to maximise its potential.
Would you say then it's outdated? You've stated you've had it for a long time. I mean, is it old? Is it outdated?
Absolutely not. It's a star machine.
And for the people who say C-130's hash and trash, what would you say to that?
don't knock it until you try it.
What's the biggest advantage that the C-130 has? I mean, its ability to land on the ground on you know, rough surfaces.
Absolutely, it can work into austere. Hang on, try again.
Take it again.
Yep.
What's the biggest advantage that the C-130 has over other aircraft that the Australian Air Force has?
Apart from a galley and a toilet, its ability to land on dirt strips, unlit fields, things like that, and that comes down to the crew as well. But its ability to carry a significant payload, long distances at night and land in dirt fields.
Great, thanks, sir.
What sort of success have you had?
We've had very good success. We have some limitations with our forward-looking infrared imaging system, but it's still adequate to perform the target of locating and identifying targets, and particularly tanks. You can see those in revetted areas, and we've had some direct hits on those vehicles with some good results that proves that we've actually impacted those targets.
What actually goes through your mind as you approach a target?
Probably the biggest thing is to make sure that we don't screw it up. We've been training for this for some time, we've been practicing the scenarios, and it's proven so far that our training has put us in very good stead for the work that we've been asked to do here. But it doesn't stop you being a little bit, I guess anxious is the term, to make sure that you don't make a mistake yourself. And that predominantly means missing the target. You've gone to a lot of effort in planning, a lot of effort to ensure that there's no one shooting back at you, and knowing what to do if they do shoot back at you, such that you want to make sure that you're in the target area under those threats. You want to make sure that your weapon counts.
Have you been fired at by anti-aircraft fire?
I personally haven't observed any anti-aircraft fire against myself or my wingman in any of the missions I've flown. We've had indications on our radar warning receiver of some systems looking or engaging us, but we haven't visually seen that. However, a number of my pilots have been engaged, and they've seen particularly anti-aircraft artillery firing at them from the ground, and they've seen airburst in the air near their aircraft that shows that they are being targeted by the ground forces.
What goes through your mind if you're fired upon?
The first thing, we train as we want to fight, and we fight as we've trained. So the guys know exactly what they need to do, and the first thing we aim to achieve is to avoid the threat that's directly influencing us at the time. And that means to get out of the way of it, to provide a manoeuvre, to employ the aircraft systems that allows us the best chance of survival. The guys are well aware of what they need to do, and we get out of the area where they might be able to engage us successfully.
This is your first experience of combat flying. You've trained for this for years. Is it what you expected?
I'm not sure that there's expectations necessarily. As I've said, we've trained very well leading up to this, and our training has proven to be correct in the way we do our business. None of us aspire to go to war, but certainly we look and wonder if we'll be able to do the job once we get there. And certainly up till now, and I expect to continue, that all of our crews here, both in the air and on the ground, have been very successful in doing their jobs and achieving what they've set out to achieve.
Is there an adrenaline rush?
I wouldn't use the term adrenaline rush. That makes it sound like it's some sort of game. There is adrenaline there with the excitement of going out there and knowing that it's a two-way range, so that not only can we shoot down range, but they can shoot back at us. And as I said previously, being prepared so that you don't make a mistake and you don't achieve your mission, well, that's always on your mind, and that focuses your attention, and the adrenaline certainly helps you to stay focused.
Do you consider it dangerous?
Of course, it could be considered dangerous. There's a lot of things that we do in our lives that are dangerous. The way we assess that is through risk. We operate the aircraft in a position that provides minimal danger to us, and we reduce the risk to an appropriate level in accordance with our government directive to make sure that we minimise the chance of anything going wrong. So yes, it's dangerous. We fly the aeroplanes every day at home. That could be considered dangerous as well. There's slightly elevated elements here that could increase that danger, but we mitigate well against them.
Are you surprised that you haven't encountered the Iraqi Air Force?
Yeah, a little surprised. In the early part of the war, when we were flying defensive counter-air missions, we fully expected to see some Iraqi Air Force aircraft come against us. It was fairly apparent after the first few days that the way the war had been structured and the planning that had been conducted, it was either fly them or lose them. And the way the coalition forces carried out their plan is testament to the success that they achieved, and those Iraqi aircraft were kept on the ground. And so fortunately we didn't have to contend with those in the air.
I'm an F-18 pilot, currently conducting combat operations over Iraq as part of Operation Falconer for the Australian Defence Force.
So, Operation Falconer, it's been a long time since fighter deployments for Australia, 50 years, nearly 35 years since they've fired a shot in combat from the Air Force. Can you tell me, what does it feel like to be part of such a historic occasion?
All the guys that I fly with, and myself included, feel really proud to be part of our squadron that's doing these operations over here. However, at the same time, we feel quite a lot of responsibility and put a lot of pressure on ourselves to do the job right, so that we represent all the Australians over here as part of the coalition and achieve what we're over here to achieve.
So can you step me through what an average day for a pilot on fighter operations is like?
We're actually working at a fairly high tempo over here, and the day kind of consists of, on a flying day, turning up to work a few hours before we walk to the aircraft to get all our briefings, including intelligence, mission briefings. Once we get that information, we go to our flight line, flight area, and get our flight gear, where we get suited up. Sorry, is this noise? You keep looking away. Sorry. Yeah. Sorry.
No, it's
It's
not
less
your
than
fault.
ideal at the moment anyway. So,
Yeah.
Flight lines are notorious for, like,
Yeah.
they are noisy places.
so your voice is overriding everything.
Yeah.
Is it? Sorry, should I go back to that question?
Yeah, okay, let's go back to that question. So, tell me, Stu, you know, it's been, oh, no, we'll go back to the other question. Can you step me through, what is it like when you turn up at work, what do you do? What is a fighter pilot on combat operations in the Middle East? You know, what is it you actually do on a daily basis?
Well, we're not flying every day. The days we do fly, we turn up to work a few hours before we have to go to the aircraft. We get our mission briefing, our intelligence briefing. Once we have all that information, I'll sit down with my wingman and go through all the aspects of the mission, such that we can go and perform that adequately. Once we finish going through that, we'll go to our life support section and get fitted up with all our survival gear that we need to wear in the aircraft. And we're carrying a lot more gear at the moment because of the potential of having to evade if you happen to get out of the aircraft and land on the ground in Iraq. Once that's done, we'll go out to the aircraft, and that's pretty much where the focus really starts for the mission. Once we get in the aircraft, it's kind of like broken up into kind of modules, if you like. And that particular time, we just focus on getting the aircraft ready and getting all our weapon systems ready. And then once that's all good to go, we'll then go out to the aircraft, out to the runway, depart, and then it's basically heads down and full concentration for the entire period of the flight. Once we get back from the flight, we go back, give our mission report to our intelligence officers, and then pretty much that's it for the day. And that period goes over quite a few hours. The airborne part of the day that's where all the excitement is, and there's pretty much many hours of intense concentration, and don't have much of a chance to sit back and relax. It's all high tempo the whole time.
Okay, some of your friends have described it as hours and hours of, you know, there can be periods where it's not so busy and periods when it's extremely busy. Does that mean there can be quite a variety, or is it busy most of the time?
It can have moments of quietness, and pretty much getting up to from where we are here to up to Iraq, that takes quite a while. So now that we've got our procedures down pat doing that, that can be quite boring if you like. But once we step over the line and into Iraq, all the communications and trying to locate targets and talking to the correct agencies, that is incredibly challenging. And to be able to do that and get all that done correctly, and then get your weapon off on the appropriate target, that is 100% concentration the whole time, and you're dealing with your wingman and the other agencies to make that happen. So it's a lot of, it's like a big team play out there.
So can you tell me what goes through your mind in those moments when you're going into the target and getting away from the target? You know, what is it that actually goes through your mind?
There's quite a lot of aspects to the mission that you're constantly thinking about. I guess you're not thinking about the romantic aspects, if you like, about going into a war. You're more thinking about the job at hand. So you're thinking about the threat from the ground, not being shot at, looking out to making sure that you can see if you are being shot at, so you can defeat those threats. You're thinking about trying to find your target, which takes quite a lot of time. So trying to do that. And you're at the same time you are trying to talk to everybody that you need to be talking about. So you're just very focused and motivated to do the job right. You're not so much thinking about, you know, oh wow, I'm over flying in Iraq at the moment. You don't really think about that. It's just pretty much stepping back to how you do your training and doing it over the top of a country that you happen to be at war with.
Okay, just stop there.
That's good.
Yeah.
I got more questions.
Yeah, I've got more questions. So can you tell me, with the training that you've done at home, how has that prepared you for these operations over in Iraq?
That's one thing that we're really happy about, is our training that we had before we came away. And that training has stemmed from many years of fighter operations within Australia. It's put us in really good stead as being one of the coalition partners, if you like, operating with the US forces and the UK forces. And the way we do business and the way they do business is completely on par. So we've just basically slotted in really nicely with those guys, and just been able to work really effectively with those other countries.
Okay. With you know, the Chief of Air Force has indicated that there might be, you know, as the weeks roll on, that the role for air power might be reducing. You know, are you looking forward to those moments when they do say that you're going home? I know at the moment they haven't, but you know, what are your thoughts about going home?
It's a bit of a two-edged sword. Obviously, everyone's really keen to get home and see our friends and families and get back to the lucky country. But as far as thinking about that, it's kind of can bring your morale down, if you like. So you just keep at the job at hand, keep plugging along, flying your missions, doing what we have to do, and we just hope that pretty soon that the job will be done and we'll be allowed to go home. And we're all really looking forward to that and getting back to Australia.
So what is morale like around the squadron?
Morale's very high. We've got a very, as I said earlier, motivated group of people. Not just the pilots, everyone that's conducting any kind of task over here as part of the Australian Air Force. And we talk to each other a lot. We're in really good spirits, and we're just really keen to do a really, really good job for the Australian government.
Regiment here in the Middle East.
The detachment is primarily here to conduct logistic support tasks in support of the coalition forces, and that requires us to be able to transport passengers, cargo, freight, and the freight might be ammunition or vehicles around the battlefield and to support the fighting forces.
Tell me, I mean, no matter how much you train, it usually is different flying in a combat situation, is it? I mean, can you ever train for that degree of preparedness?
It wouldn't matter how hard we train. The thing that you can't emphasise enough is the vast difference there is between training and a combat environment. The stress levels in a combat environment are totally different, and as I say, it wouldn't matter how hard you exercise, you just can't make the same environment to increase the stress levels.
Obviously, it's been a very busy time here for yourself and for your pilots and also the ground crew. Has there been any problems? I mean, the downdraft that the jets throw up when they come down, has there been any problems that perhaps you didn't think of before you deployed that you've encountered here, and how have you got through them?
The soldiers and the officers on this detachment are extremely well trained. They're very disciplined. They're fantastic operators, and certainly there aren't many of the problems that we're no. Yeah.
So tell me about the role that you've played here in the war against the Iraqi weapons of disarmament. I mean, what role have the CH-47s and of course your crew played?
The 5 Aviation Regiment Detachment was deployed over here to support combat forces by providing logistics support, and that is the carriage of passengers, freight, cargo, and the freight or cargo might be ammunition, it might be vehicles. The lads are extremely well trained, they're very disciplined, they're extremely good at their job, and we're achieving all of our tasks that have been set for us.
You say well trained, I mean how well trained can one be from back home in Australia to here where it is actually a combat zone? I mean, can you ever be that prepared?
You cannot simulate a combat environment. Certainly the training regime we put these blokes through back in Australia is very rigid. We accept nothing but the highest standards, but you just can't simulate that combat environment. And that's the added stress, which does take a bit of time in an environment like this to prepare for and to train up for.
Talking about the environment, I mean, how many challenges have you faced, if you like, between Australia and now where you've deployed? I mean, have there been any incidents where perhaps you weren't prepared and you've had to adapt and overcome?
I think generally we've been prepared for everything, but that doesn't mean, however, that there are stark contrasts between where we were in North Queensland and over here. North Queensland's tropical, it's a wet season when we left. Over here the altitude is higher, the air's a lot drier, and it was certainly a lot colder when we first got here. But it's those dry conditions with the dust storms and the sandstorms which create problems for our operations and for the aircraft.
What's been the hardest, day or night flying?
Night flying by has been no small feat for our operators. In very flat, low contrast terrain, low flying at night can be quite dangerous. We've got a number of risk mitigation strategies that we employ to ensure that it's safe, but it is still a very fatiguing environment.
It must be hard on your pilots and also your air crew. I mean, they're working 24/7 around the clock. How has it been on them? I mean, and how do you ensure that they're getting the appropriate rest and maintaining their safety?
Well, it's not just the air crew, it's the entire detachment, because the maintainers are still working very, very long hours to ensure our serviceability rates. And the tradesmen have done extremely well while we've been over here to ensure that the aircraft have been serviceable as often as they possibly could. But you are quite right, when we're operating 24 hours a day and 7 days a week, we do have to make sure that our people don't get overly fatigued. We can deal with acute fatigue, but it's the long-term chronic fatigue which can and does often become a problem. And we've got endurance limitations on our people, and generally we won't have our people working more than sort of 12 hours a day. The sleeping quarters that we've got for them are certainly adequate for them to get enough rest in the hot environment. It's pretty warm at the moment, I must admit.
Tell me about the difference very quickly between tropical North Queensland, Townsville, which is your home, and over here in the Middle East. I mean, as far as the members go, how has that acclimatisation period been?
It hasn't been too bad. We left Australia in the wet season, so it was quite humid. Over here it was very dry, a bit cooler, but I think because they'd already been used to working in a humid environment, getting used to a drier environment was far easier for them. The strong winds, the dust and the sandstorms, which are quite often extremely strong, and certainly we have to curtail our operations during those periods, has been a problem. But as far as acclimatisation goes, the lads have done extremely well.
and contact with family members home, just as a last question. How has that been? I mean, is that important?
It's essential. We need to make sure that both the people over here are able to talk to the families as often as possible, but certainly the families over there who are missing their loved ones need to have some sort of means of contact with them, and so it has been extremely important. Early on in the piece there were operational security reasons which precluded us being able to get direct lines of communication home, but for about the last 4 or 5 weeks the lads have been able to get on the telephone and ring quite regularly, and certainly we've established email communications home, and that seems to be working quite well. But we don't underestimate the importance of allowing our people to talk to their families.
What's been the purpose of your visit here to Baghdad?
Over the last couple of days I've visited the troops. I've been establishing a forward headquarters here with the Americans and the British. We have Special Forces troops that I wanted to see, and the air traffic controllers who have just moved in. In addition, we have some military people attached to ORHA, the Organisation for Reconstruction and Humanitarian Aid. So it's been establishing the headquarters and visiting our people in Baghdad.
What has been set up here at this palace?
At the palace is the main American headquarters here in Baghdad. I've set up the forward headquarters and an operations room here, and we'll use this as our main base. We have people in other locations in Baghdad. I've been out to visit those.
And what will be the role of Australian National Headquarters in this restructuring phase of Iraq?
The headquarters will coordinate the various activities that we're running in Iraq. There's a number of areas we're contributing, and headquarters will pull that together, tie it in with the Americans and the other organisations that are here. Also today we've supported the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, looking at the old embassy site, the old residence, and scoping out a suitable location for an alternate embassy site. And I've been out with our Special Forces operators today and a representative from DFAT to do that. Just, you go on.
So I'll ask the fourth question. With DFAT, you say foreign affairs.
Yep, sorry. Yep.
No, that's also checking ministries needs for catalyst. So
Yeah, what's up, Catalyst? Okay, yeah, that's a good one. Yep.
okay. Start off with what support role has the ADF or Australian National Headquarters provided to other agencies in Baghdad in this period?
Okay, today we've taken some Australians who are going to work with the Organisation for Reconstruction and Humanitarian Aid into Baghdad, linked them up with that organisation. We've also spoken to some of the people in that organisation about some work we're doing. We took some DFAT representatives in to look at the old residence and also to scope out a site and select a site for a future Australian embassy in Iraq. So we provided some security assessment, escort for that task.
The Minister has announced the commencement of Operation Catalyst. What is that about?
Operation Catalyst follows Falconer. Falconer was the decisive combat operations to win the war in Iraq. That's been done. Op Catalyst will now be the various operations to assist in the reconstruction of Iraq and the rebuilding.
Yep. Interview, take two. So what has been the purpose of your visit here in Baghdad?
There's been two purposes. One was to visit the troops we have on the ground here, my forward headquarters, which is established in the palace here, the air traffic controllers who are getting established at Baghdad International Airport and will soon be running it, and the Special Forces elements that we have on the ground here. Second purpose was to assist the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. We escorted one of their people in who was going to work with the Organisation for Reconstruction and Humanitarian Aid. But more importantly, we took some DFAT representatives with one of our Special Forces teams to look at the original residence that was used here. And we then went this afternoon to a potential embassy site and conducted a security assessment for that so that Australia can get an embassy established here in Iraq in due course.
And what has been set up here at the palace?
What you've got at the palace is the main American headquarters and a British forward headquarters and now an Australian forward headquarters. I've set up the forward elements of the national headquarters here in the palace with an operations room, and we have some accommodation in the grounds here. From here we've worked out to the various areas, both into Baghdad, downtown where I was today, and out around the international airport.
And what would be the role of Australian National Headquarters during this restructuring phase of Iraq?
It'll be similar to the role we had during the main manoeuvre war, except the focus will be different. The role of the national headquarters will be to coordinate the activities of the various Australian elements and look after our national interests.
And what roles or support has the Australian Defence Force provided to other agencies with that area?
We've provided escort to get people into the organisation for reconstruction and humanitarian aid, and today we've provided an escort to Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade personnel to look at the old residence and to look at a potential new embassy site which we secured on their behalf so that they could have a look at it. It was a pretty successful sort of day.
The Minister has announced the commencement of Operation Catalyst. What is Operation Catalyst about?
It's the next stage of our operations here in Iraq. The first stage was Operation Falconer, the decisive manoeuvre and combat phase. That has now ceased, and as we move into Operation Catalyst, that will be the reconstruction of Iraq and the Australian contribution. So we're moving away from the direct warfighting and combat role in Operation Falconer to the reconstruction and humanitarian aid aspect of Operation Catalyst. That said, it's still pretty unstable here on the ground in parts and can still be dangerous. There have been a number of firefights here since I've been here, and there were 2 attacks on convoys while I was in town this morning and this afternoon. So our people are still in harm's way, but the focus is now on assisting in the reconstruction.
Okay, so what's happening right now up in the Gulf?
Right, we're Canimbla. It's part of an Australian task group up here. We're participating in the multinational interception force. We're enforcing, excuse me, right at the wrong moment. And we're enforcing United Nations sanctions against Iraq.
And what does that involve?
Well, essentially, it's a boarding operation. We board and investigate all sorts of shipping traffic coming into the area or coming out of Iraq to make sure there's no contraband being smuggled into Iraq or brought out of Iraq, essentially.
Yeah, I've heard that oil and dates are sort of, and dates surprises me, I guess. Why are they so highly sought after?
Well, dates are extremely valuable. In fact, dates are worth more than oil. And so the smuggling of dates is forbidden under the UN sanctions list. And so we have to enforce them.
There seems to be a lot going on up here. It's been a busy time for you?
It's been very busy, yeah. It's good.
And when HMAS Canimbla left Sydney, your job was to come up here and prepare for war, essentially, wasn't it?
Well, that's correct. We were positioned in the Gulf to add pressure to add weight to the diplomatic efforts ongoing in the UN.
And so, what sort of preparations did you make here?
Well, we've made our normal preparations as we would for any operation. So we've done a very rigorous regime of training and preparation, and that's ongoing, as we would normally do in any case.
Right. And so what do you think Canimbla's role will be if the government do decide to go into the US?
Well, it's a very capable ship. It can perform a number of roles, and we perform whatever function it's been determined that the government wants to do should that decision be made.
Commander, what sort of tasks has the task group been undertaking up here in the Gulf?
We've been part of the multinational interception force, enforcing sanctions against Iraq. That is primarily a boarding function. We've been boarding ships coming out of Iraq and going into Iraq, making sure that there's no no prohibited goods being smuggled into Iraq and making sure that things like weapons of mass destruction and so on aren't being smuggled out of Iraq.
Right. And has that been a busy time for the crew?
Oh, extremely busy, but very satisfying. It's a good job, and we enjoy doing it.
We've noticed that during our time on board, there's been a number of boarding parties going out. Are these people specifically trained in that role?
Yes, they are. Although they come from a variety of departments within the ship, they've all received specialist training. It's been a very rigorous training regime, and so they're well trained and well placed to do the task.
Brandon, we noticed that the Americans have a different approach, and some of the bigger container ships are actually boarded by their SEALs. Do the Australians have any special forces on board to undertake the larger vessels?
No, not at all. As I said, our sailors come from a variety of departments within the ship. They have just received special training to enable them to fulfil this role.
So who would make up a boarding party?
Well, it could
What
be
areas?
Well, it could be anybody. I mean, they're led by normally by an officer, a junior officer who's trained to take on that leadership role. And the boarding party itself is made up of cooks, stewards, medics, engineers, seamen. It could be anybody really.
When they find illicit cargo such as oil and dates, are they taking the ship's crew into custody and seizing the vessels, or what are their actions?
Well, at the moment, what we do with most of the vessels that are coming out are actually cargo hours, and they simply return to their last port of call, which is normally back in Iraq.
Right, and so it's more a herding process then?
Oh, you could say that, yeah.
I like the sheep dog.
It was like herding cats in the rain, really.
Yeah, and so at what point do you make a decision to seize a vessel? If they keep coming out, the same vessel keeps coming out?
Well, at the moment, I guess we would make that decision based on the circumstances of the time, and it wouldn't be a decision that we, as a ship, would make anyway. We would seek guidance from the Maritime Interception Force commander, who's actually resident in the ship.
Right. And if war breaks out with Iraq, does your role then change?
Well, what the ship does in any future conflict will really be subject to government direction, and we'll do whatever the government decides is appropriate for us.
Yeah.